On the bright Christmas morning when the winter sun felt softer than usual and the festive air made the world look gentler, Nora Ellsworth sat on a wooden bench outside the small cafe on Pinebrook Street, staring at her reflection in the window and wondering how many times her heart could break before it simply refused to hope again. She had dressed carefully for her blind date, a flowing cream sweater, a red scarf around her neck, and her copper-brown hair tied in a loose, hopeful style that felt more vulnerable than she wanted to admit. Yet as she watched the man she was supposed to meet walk toward her, pause, glance at her once, and then turn around without even saying hello, the glassy sunlight above her felt colder. It wasn't the first time she had been rejected, but something about being dismissed so casually on Christmas morning made the pain sharper, more humiliating, as if the world had carved a reminder across her heart that she wasn't enough. That was when the real story began, not in the moment she was rejected, but in the moment she lifted her eyes from the dull sidewalk and saw a little girl staring at her with a gaze full of innocence and need, two things Nora had almost forgotten existed in her life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected moments, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps us bring more heart-touching stories to you. Nora stayed seated even though every instinct told her to walk away before someone else witnessed her embarrassment. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter, that he didn't owe her anything, that dating was just messy and unpredictable. But deep inside, she felt something break in a quiet, final way, like a candle that had been burning too long finally flickering out. After losing her parents early in life, closing the bakery she had worked so hard to build, and watching relationships fall apart before they could take shape, rejection was no stranger. But on Christmas morning, she had hoped, just once, for something different. Something gentle. Something that might remind her she still deserved to be chosen. The sound of small footsteps changed everything. A girl no older than 6, dressed in a soft lavender jacket, woolen mittens, and a tiny knitted hat with pom-poms, approached Nora hesitantly. The child's hair was light brown, falling in loose waves around her face, her cheeks slightly red from the winter breeze. There was something fragile yet determined in the way she walked, as if she was used to being careful but also used to needing courage. She stopped in front of Nora and simply stared, studying her with an expression that made Nora straighten instinctively, not to impress, but to appear stronger, because something in the girl's eyes told her this moment mattered. Nora forced a small smile even though her chest still felt tight. She assumed the child might be lost or waiting for someone nearby, but before she could speak, she heard the doorbell behind her chime and a tall man hurried out of the cafe. He looked exhausted, wearing a simple gray coat, dark jeans, and an expression that held sadness around the edges. His hair was charcoal black, slightly messy, and his posture suggested he carried the weight of both worry and responsibility. Nora noticed how gently he placed his hand on the little girl's shoulder, how carefully he knelt beside her, how he looked at her not with frustration but with concern. Nora guessed he must be her father. She stood up politely, ready to step aside so they could continue their day, but just as she did, the little girl stepped closer and tugged at her scarf with tiny fingers. It wasn't rough or rude, just hopeful, a silent plea. And then, in a soft voice filled with an innocence that broke through Nora's heart like sunlight through a window, she asked a question so unexpected that the air around them seemed to shift. She asked if Nora could be her new mom. Nora froze. Everything inside her, her disappointment, her loneliness, her hope she kept hidden carefully, rose up at once, leaving her breathless. The man, realizing what his daughter had done, apologized hurriedly, clearly embarrassed, but Nora couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't look away from the little girl's wide-eyed sincerity. Children didn't ask such questions lightly. They asked because something inside them needed an answer. The girl's name was Kira, and her father was Rowan Hale, a widower who had been trying to navigate life alone with more difficulty than he was willing to admit to anyone. His wife had passed away when Kira was 3, and though 3 years had passed, grief still lived inside him in quiet, echoing ways. Rowan wasn't looking for romance, wasn't looking for a replacement, wasn't looking for anything except to see his daughter smile again the way she used to. But earlier that day, he had noticed the way Kira kept glancing at other families, the ones laughing together, the ones sharing Christmas cookies, the ones walking hand in hand, and something inside her had cracked. He knew it because he felt the same crack inside himself every time he saw the things he couldn't give her. Nora listened as Rowan tried to explain awkwardly, his voice low, his guilt visible. He told her that Kira tended to say things impulsively when she felt safe around someone, and Nora realized how strange it was that a child who barely knew her already felt safe enough to ask such a vulnerable question. And maybe it was because Nora, standing there with her broken hopes and lonely heart, radiated something familiar, something gentle, something motherly, something kind. Rowan apologized again and tried to pull his daughter away so they wouldn't bother Nora, but Kira refused to let go of her scarf. That single gesture changed everything. Nora crouched down, meeting Kira's eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt the world slow around her. She saw loneliness in the child's gaze that mirrored her own, but she also saw something else: trust. Pure, simple trust that no grown-up had offered Nora in a very long time. It was the beginning of something unexpected. Rowan, clearly flustered, invited Nora to join them inside for a warm drink as an apology for the awkwardness. Nora hesitated, but something inside her whispered that maybe this moment wasn't random. Maybe it was a small miracle disguised as coincidence. So she agreed. Inside the cafe, sunlight poured through the large windows, scattering golden reflections across the wooden tables, and the Christmas decorations hung lovingly by the staff. The festive daytime buzz created a soft hum around them, but somehow Nora, Rowan, and Kira sat in a little world of their own near the corner window. Rowan shared pieces of their life. It wasn't planned, but it came out naturally. He spoke with honesty, and Nora listened with the kind of attention that made him feel unexpectedly understood. Kira, meanwhile, kept leaning against Nora's arm, her small hand occasionally brushing Nora's fingers as if checking she was still there. Nora shared a bit too: her bakery, her losses, her fears, and the way life had taught her to hope carefully but persistently. She hadn't expected Rowan to listen so quietly, so respectfully. His eyes held a mix of empathy and admiration that she hadn't felt from anyone in years. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. They walked together to the nearby community park where the Christmas fair was taking place. The bright daytime sky, the music, the smell of cinnamon rolls, and the sparkling decorations made everything feel lighter. Rowan watched as Nora helped Kira win a small plush toy at a game booth, laughing genuinely for the first time in months. He saw a version of happiness on his daughter's face that he thought might never return. And Nora, standing between them, began to feel something shift in her chest, not the fragile hope she had carried earlier in the day, but a new, growing warmth that felt anchored in something real. Over the next weeks after Christmas, Rowan and Nora continued to see each other, not as a couple at first, but as two people cautiously stepping into each other's lives. Nora joined them for breakfast outings, small walks, grocery errands, and community events. She grew closer to Kira slowly, naturally, until the little girl's hand found hers without needing permission. Rowan noticed that Nora didn't try to replace anyone; she simply added warmth to their world, filling the spaces they didn't know were still empty. But the journey wasn't smooth. Nora battled insecurity, afraid she wasn't enough. Rowan struggled with guilt, feeling he was betraying the memory of his late wife. And Kira worried that she had caused trouble by asking a stranger to become part of their life. There were moments of silence, moments of fear, moments where each wondered if they were making a mistake. But every time they drifted apart, sometimes a small gesture, sometimes a difficult conversation, sometimes a quiet shared moment, pulled them back together. It wasn't destiny. It wasn't magic. It was choice. A slow, steady choice to heal. Months passed, and the daytime warmth of spring began replacing winter's chill. One sunny afternoon, while Nora was helping Kira paint a small wooden birdhouse in the backyard, Rowan watched them from the porch with a soft expression on his face. He realized Nora had become part of their lives, not because of a question asked on Christmas morning, but because she had shown up afterward, again and again, with patience, compassion, and courage. He walked toward them slowly, the sunlight warm on his face, and sat beside them. And although no grand words were spoken, the look he shared with Nora was enough to tell her that something had shifted, something deeper, something real. Love, the kind built on gentle moments and quiet healing, had found them. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps us continue spreading hope, love, and real-life inspiration. Special request: comment below what moment in this story moved you the most. Your words truly matter. As months turned into a year, Nora, Rowan, and Kira became a family, not suddenly, not dramatically, but tenderly, through countless small choices made in daylight moments that felt honest and pure. And every Christmas since then, when the morning sun warmed their home, Kira would still hold Nora's hand tightly, remembering the day she found not just a mother, but a new beginning for all three of them. The rejection Nora faced that morning had simply been the last closed door before the right one opened. A door held open by a little girl with a brave heart who had asked the question that changed everything. And Nora, who once believed she was unworthy of being chosen, finally understood the truth: sometimes love doesn't fail us. Sometimes it simply arrives in a different form, at a different moment, carried by the soft, hopeful voice of a child who sees the goodness in us before we see it ourselves.